So, welcome to our 5th virtual coffee talk. To give everybody a little bit of background, what is Kerstin's virtual coffee talk? It started in the Corona time, where we had always on Fridays a company coffee talk together, everybody. We had then started to discuss also their topics which are more work related. And then I thought maybe it's also interesting for other people to join. And we initiated this official virtual coffee talks in May and June. We had it always at Friday from 9 to 10 to allow also our company people from Singapore and UK to join, even if in UK it's a little bit early, it's currently 8 to 9. And now in autumn, I continue this little tradition with a new series of coffee talks. And today is our first coffee talk about project management, assess the maturity. So welcome everybody to join us. We will go through the agenda and we will first have small explanation from my side. What do I define as project maturity assessment? Getting some key messages and then coming to the section, what's your story? And today I am very pleased to have two guest speakers with me in the call. On one side, it's Raphael Jung from Sympulse, which I know already since, I have to calculate, I think it's 15 years where we together worked at
2006 or something.
Yes, exactly. Where we together worked as Raiffeisen. At that time, I was still working for Accenture and you were already working for Sympulse, I have to say.
Yes.
Or at that time, it was called Solution Providers. It was an interesting time and we had quite some conflicts, but also there, coming back to our topic, project management was a key point. It was more than contract management, which is, from my perspective, an important point from project management side. Then on the other side, I have Shiram also on the call. Thanks, Shiram, for joining. Shiram is coming from London, where I met him when working for HSBC. He's the director, at least for the digital program from the private bank. Shiram, you have to correct me what's now your title and your role, but I guess it's still working in the digital world and ensuring that the digital pieces for HSBC is delivered.
Correct, that's still the case. Thank you.
Perfect. Then we have Vlad. Vlad is sitting in Singapore, so we are today very global. Vlad is helping me a little bit to moderate the chat and the coffee talk later on. So every participant is allowed, of course, and is asked to ask questions. You can do this either via the chat or you can raise your hand and then we give you speaker allowance. So the session is a little bit divided in two pieces. First is a little bit a theoretical piece. To give you a little bit of background, what is project management assessment? I developed there a little framework, which I would like to go through with you. And afterwards, we have a discussion and here also the experiences from Raphael Shiram concerning the topic project management and the maturity of project management and how to assess what is going wrong, and more importantly, how to define the path to green again when projects are not going in the right direction. So starting, I'm usually starting at this point with my story, why I think this topic is important. And I have listed here 3, from my perspective, important points, which I'm very often seeing when reviewing projects. The first thing is basics of project management are missing. So no scope is documented, it's not really managed, no progress tracking. So the homework from the project manager is not really done. Then the second thing I'm also very often seeing is senior management and senior leadership knows it better without listening to the messages of the people. And usually they are not making it better, but worse. This is usually a challenge how to correct these kind of things and get it back to the green path. Then we have also, as a third one, project managers who believe they are managers, but at the end of the day, they don't know what to do. And sometimes they acknowledge that there is a problem, but it's very difficult for them to fix it. So the definition of the path to green is a very difficult one as well, even after acknowledging that things are going wrong. So going to the project maturity assessment. As you might know, we have at OnPoint developed a PMO framework, which I'm using also as a project management framework, which is divided in 7 pieces. It's starting with the scope and deliverable management, quality assurance, plan, workforce management, finance and vendor management, governance, reporting, risk and dependency management, as well as communication and administration. I'm using this framework very often when I'm coming to a project and setting it up, align this or along the 7 dimensions. And I think it should help us also to assess if a project is going in the right direction or not. Because if a project is wrong, it's like the disaster we are seeing currently on lots of places in the world. So we have many challenges and we need to find the right way how to secure and work against it. So I like this picture very much because there are currently also lots of fires in the world and we need to find the plane which is then giving water to all the fire. When I review my project management framework, coming to the first area, scope and deliverable management, these are usually the questions I'm asking when assessing if a project is going in the right way or not. It's starting with the scope, goes then to if the scope changes, so the change management process is existing, and also reviewing if there is a project approach and if the outcome of the project is also documented. Very often you have also the problem there are no sign-off processes, so also a question which I'm usually asking. Then plan and workforce management for me usually has the longest questions lists because lots of things are usually necessary in this area. You need to estimate the required effort and you need then also to see if you have the resources to manage and to being able to deliver what you have estimated before. You need to have a staffing plan and also the right skills in order to deliver the project. And then, of course, you have quite a lot of more administrative tasks which you need to do. But important in this area is you need to estimate and you need to put the estimates over the timeline. Something I'm also sometimes not seeing. So projects are just running and believing if they are doing it with internal people, these are costs which are there anyway. So I don't need to estimate and I don't need to track. Which is then already one of the biggest problems because you don't know how big the mountain is you still have to climb. And people are saying, oh, we don't have enough resources. And then I'm asking, and what is your proof for that? Have you ever done an estimate? And do you know where you are standing? Usually people don't have done it because if people are there anyway from the organization, you don't have to pay them. They believe they also don't need to estimate, which I think is one of the biggest problems we are seeing in projects. Then we go to finance and vendor management. Also here, you need to manage your external parties. And of course, you need to manage also the finance, the numbers of your project. Very often here, I'm also seeing that projects or project manager managing the costs, meaning the external costs, so the cash out. And as internal people are perceived as costs which are there anyway, it's very difficult to have an estimated time to completion. As I said before, with the resources, this is then the consequences. If you're just tracking money in terms of cash out, you don't get an understanding what are the real costs of the projects. Very often I'm also seeing that there is no precise sourcing strategy. They're just going out and try to find people without having a real strategy behind it. So my next area, governance and reporting management. Of course, each project needs a governance. You need to have a steering. The governance needs to be documented. You should have also reporting cycles. I'm a fan of reporting from the bottom to the top. So you're asking everybody on the project once a week to report what is his status. I personally found it very helpful at least once a week to sit down and reflect what is the status of the project, what have we achieved, what do we plan next week, what are the issues and risks. Of course, this takes time, and very often project managers are saying, why should I do this? Nobody is reading it. Then I'm always explaining, yeah, but a status report is not just for externals and your whoever of your stakeholders, and if they're not interested, they're not interested. For me, status reporting is very much something as a tool for a project manager to understand where the project is and what the next actions should be. And it's a time of reflection and helping you to understand what the next step should be. So even if nobody is asking for it, I can just advise, take the time once a week and really write it down, which is then also very helpful if sponsors are suddenly coming up and asking you what the status is. At least you have documented it and you have it somewhere in your drawer. You can always put it up and you are prepared for this kind of questions. Then we have dependency, issue, and risk management. Also an interesting area. I just listed as key questions for all three if it's existing. Very often I'm seeing that risks are not really systematically tracked. I must admit, the first time I saw risk management in a professional manner being done, this was at HSBC. I think they are one of the strongest in their risk management. And since then, I must admit that I'm always trying to force on the project that especially the risks are reviewed on a monthly basis and also integrated in an upwards reporting. So asking really everybody on the project to document the risks and put them forward in order to allow project management to assess them and then also to see what are the key risks on the project. Quality assurance management on small project for sure, not really done in a special manner, but if the project is getting bigger, it should have a special focus. And people always forget that reviews and sign-off cycles are also a quality assurance process, which they should follow. Then we have communication and administration. This is usually done on all projects and preferable the task of the PMO. They are doing the administrational tasks and the communication, where I'm always saying a PMO is more than just setting up meetings. A real PMO is your team who is providing you your tools to manage and navigate the project. So what I then try to do is to assess if all my questions are answered. I could calculate a matrix and saying, okay, if all the questions, and all will be difficult, but nearly 90% are answered, I would say the project is in excellent shape. If it's more nearly everything, but between 75 and 90%, I believe you will deliver. Everything below, I would consider improvements required. There are lots of risks for your project. And if you just answer 25% roughly with no answer, and you are, I would say you are deep shit and you will not deliver and you need to turn around plan. So
how many have you encountered in the first bracket, Kerstin?
I must admit I encountered the last category quite some time when I'm doing project reviews, and more often than you would expect, because also if projects are saying we are following, for example, an official methodology like Hermes, it's not so easy to follow it. Even if the methodology is saying you need this deliverable, some people believe we don't need it. And then after half a year realizing, there might have been a reason why this is listed as a deliverable. So I would say I'm seeing more often the fail than I would have expected. So people are, as I said, project management and PMO just doing the admin and administrating the project, but not really managing. If you want to manage, I think you need to answer more in the category of 75 above, then you are really managing. Otherwise, it's getting lower and then you are just administrating. So that's roughly my picture, which you then, of course, you can have an official assessment And also, because I like pictures, you can also have a nice matrix to illustrate also where you are. So that's for me a way which I found quite interesting, where you can officially assess the success rate of a project. But of course, later on, I'm very interested, Raphael, how you do your assessment of the project. And if you use any kind of matrices in order to see why and if a project is going right or wrong.
Yes, actually we do. I've done loads of assessments. Unfortunately, usually I'm only being called when, and I expect already to be in the lower half of the brackets, of course. But no, actually at SynPass we have quite an extensive framework to assess projects. I think one of the key elements is also to think about in what phase a project is, because different things become, or I mean, there's some basics that are always important, and everything you also have on your list, they are always important throughout the whole project life cycle. Mm-hmm. But often, I mean, factors are a bit more important potentially in initiation phase rather, or opposed to when you are briefly before you have to go live. So nobody is worried about the schedule of events if only you're initiating a project, but it's very bad if these deliverables are not there before you want to go live. Mm-hmm. So the project life cycle, I think, is also something that is quite important to consider when assessing the maturity and the state of a program or project.
Yeah. What I have also then seen that the path to green is also very difficult to define. Yeah. And this is where lots of project managers might realize, okay, I have a problem, but then to define how to get out of the shit is very, very difficult for most of the people. Yeah. And I have listed here things which I think are crucial to get back on the path to green. So understanding the scope and how to manage it is key. Understanding the status and what is done and what is open, also very important. Because if you don't know how your completion rate is, how far you are on the way, how do you want to assess if you are on track or not? So I think scope and status are for me very important. Nowadays, I must admit, I'm not really the fan of Agile, but something I really like, that is the definition of done. And surprisingly, I think that's also very often a key point. When is something really done? And what I also like on Agile is, of course, burn down graphs. When I worked at Accenture, it was at that time burn up graphs, but now we are more modern, we are down. And if you're not able to draw a burn down graph and put on the graph where you are in your project, then I guess you have also an issue, because then you can also not understand the next point, the remaining work. So what has still to be done? So that's for me also key. Scope, status, and the remaining work are key to being understood by a project manager, because then you can really work on when do you think you are finished. Of course, then it's also coming, you need to plan the remaining work. You need also to ensure, and that's very often underestimated, contracts. A project very often is just also going wrong because the contract is not as it should be. What do I mean with this? If you sign a contract with a software provider who is providing the software and you have to integrate it, very important is that, from my perspective, that there are penalties. A contract without a penalty, when the software provider can deliver whenever he wants, is the first indication that you will have issues during the project. Because how can you put any pressure and any intention on sticking to dates if there is not at least the intention through a penalty to stick to the dates? That's for me also something very important, which I have seen very, very often, especially from a client perspective. And interestingly, you would think the client is in a better position. He should always push that this kind of things, mechanisms, are in the contract. At my recent client, I'd learned that also clients are under pressure to sign contracts, and then they are coming to the point to accept that software providers are taking this kind of mechanism out. And then when you execute, you are realizing, okay, this was not a good step. So overall, I would say if you have the majority and your path to green under control, you can also have this nice picture as I see here, unfold all his beauty, leading me to more the summary of project management. So project management for sure is also complex. It has lots of challenges, but the acknowledgement, if you need help, is for me the first step. But defining the path to green is really the difficult piece. If you are once in a project which are not on track, defining the path to green, the critical step. Sometimes maybe think and consider also external help, because sometimes outsiders can give you better hints and have more experience how to define path to green. The buy-in of all stakeholders is also important. So as a project manager, I have also seen that project managers realize they have a problem, but stakeholders and the steering committee not. All stakeholders are believing, yeah, all fine, we will fix it like this, and the project manager is not really behind it. At the end of the day, all is coming to ask for help if you see your project is going wrong and you have issues defining the path to green. That would be my summary. And now I'm coming to the interesting part of discussions with my guest speakers, and hopefully people in the round have also later on questions. And Raphael, maybe you are starting and give us some of your experiences where you think projects were going wrong, and how have you assessed the root cause for it, and what were the measures to get it back to green?
Yeah, thanks, Kerstin. Clearly, you told me I don't have to prepare much. And now
yeah, that's not much.
Clearly, I have some experience I can base on. So, maybe let's pick one or two examples I've assessed in the past. So one was actually you know that one, Kerstin, a small insurer, a direct insurer. They called me actually 5 days after they should have gone live and asked me whether I can come and have a look where they really are. And I mean, if you already know that a program is kind of really in trouble, has missed timelines, I think it's also important to not only structure things reasonably, but also focus when doing an assessment. Because as you said, Kerstin, I mean, in the end, if a program is really in trouble, it's not done with just tweaking in the end little tiny bits and pieces, but you kind of have to think big and understand the root causes. So what I experienced in that case was exactly what you also said, vendor management. So also understanding who has to do what and what is really left. But to know and to get to the bottom of that, you also have to understand what is really needed. For example, what is really needed for go live, what is not relevant. Because I mean, the complex world we're in, and Miriam posed a question about dependencies already. You can't always manage all of that. So I think also in complex programs or projects, it's important to simplify. So what I usually also look at in the beginning is there really a reasonably simple plan as well that fits together, because that also helps to manage dependencies. But so in that specific case, we assessed what's really needed to be able to go live in a variety of areas: functional readiness, non-functional readiness, cutover readiness, post-life readiness, all these areas, to kind of nail it down and get the whole program and project focused again on a more simpler path, because people also tend to lose focus in the complex world we live in. So simplification from my perspective, and having a reasonable, simple framework like you presented, Kerstin, with 7 areas, that really helps. So that's just one example to start off with, Kerstin. So
yeah, I can fully confirm. I just had at my client, they were showing me a Microsoft project plan with 500 entries, and I said, okay, yeah, it's I cannot manage this one.
No.
Do you have a master plan? No.
Plan has to fit on one page. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's not a good plan.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
mean, yeah, and also back to dependencies management. So people then think, okay, I have this last vast MS project plan with loads of dependencies in there, but that doesn't really help to address them or manage it. So, but people then think, okay, we do have dependency management under control, but they don't.
Yes, then once somebody asked me, okay, dependency management, can you do this in a tool? I think this was at our client in London, and I said, okay, real dependency management in a tool, I believe this is still more in the head of the leadership team, that you really understand by discussing beforehand with all the different parties what are your internal and external dependencies. I don't think you can manage this just via a tool.
No, I fully agree. Fully agree. And I think it came to mind before, when you said before, or you simply understand at some point why a certain deliverable is important. Yes, I fully agree, and I fully am very fond of structured management, project management methodology. But nevertheless, I think there's a difference between managing a program or a project and leading a program. Because what I also encounter a lot when I do project reviews or on my daily project work is that people think, okay, I have now written a document, I have put it in a project plan in MS Project, so now it's well managed. But it's a big difference to properly lead a program. So what I also do when I assess programs is really look at how it is really led. Like you said, Kerstin, I mean, status reports, it's not just to compile a report and to bother people on a weekly basis with reports, but it should be a piece in the end to discuss and lead the project and be active and address the right things at the right point in time. So what I very often encounter is that people mistake project management with just having the documents and we were all fine, and with really leading a project, which is a different story again.
Yes. I guess, Shiram, you have also a view on that one. Happy to hear your experience on, and especially on the project which were not going so wide. How did you assess them, and how do you find the path to green?
Definitely. Thanks, Raphael and Kerstin. I agree with almost everything you've said. I'll touch on a few things. I mean, Kerstin, you mentioned an interesting point. You said you're not a fan of Agile. And I am also in the same place. I think it's used as a substitute to do a lot of things badly or without the correct level of detail. And used to say, oh, we are Agile. I'll give you an example. I was at a call center implementation of Salesforce for a major insurer in the UK. And the company Salesforce were there as well, the consultants on the project, and they had 6 or 7 sprints in order to build the Service Cloud offering to go live in the contact centers of this insurer. For sprint 5, they needed people from the home insurance, from the pet insurance, and the motor insurance sections of the call center to come and participate. And so they went and asked the capacity planner in the call center to say, okay, I need 3 people from home insurance, 2 from motor insurance, 2 from pet insurance for the sprint. And the capacity planner sits there in a meeting, say, okay, when do you need them? They say, okay, well, you need them on Monday. I said, then the capacity planner says, really? We are talking on Wednesday, you want them on Monday. We have targets for call waiting time. We have targets for call abandon rates. And I have to find replacements. If you need these people, I need replacements. So you can't just take them like that. To which the Salesforce consultant, the leader, he said, oh no, we're Agile. So that was his response. And then we said, right. Then the capacity planner just laughed and said, sorry, I have targets. So this is an example of where Agile is seen as a substitute for good planning or even basic planning. It's just, there are good things in Agile, like you mentioned, Kerstin, with respect to the burn down charts are good. The idea of trying to keep scope manageable and not trying to take too much on is good. But there's also agile, which can be used for development as opposed to agile that's used for delivery. Those are two different things. It's an important concept to differentiate between the two. And in many cases, there are examples where it's possible to do agile development, but not agile delivery. For example, if you're trying to replace an existing system that's there, that has some basic minimum functionality. See, of the project management triangle, you have scope, you have time, and you have cost. And in agile expects the scope to be flexible and the time and cost to be fixed. But in many cases, that's not the case. For example, when the project that I'm currently working, the program that I'm currently working on with my client, which is a big bank in London, is they're trying to replace all their digital systems with websites and mobile apps with new ones. So as a very minimum, the minimum viable product is something that already exists on the website. They obviously expect better in terms of features, in terms of navigation, in terms of look and feel. But the scope is not flexible. You can't say, okay, I'll deliver one third of the website in 3 months, another third of the website in another month, with that, and then the documents functionality in another third month. Because it doesn't work that way, because you need something which needs to be delivered. And in these cases, we're agile and trying to go without any plan, any estimation, proper design. What ends up happening is you end up going to a position where the executives on top of this go and present something to say, okay, something will be live in April. It's based on nothing. It's based on no planning. It's just a commitment to from one executive to another, based on no planning. So, and that's it. We say you're agile, you deliver. So it's the most used, and I would say abused word in project management.
Yes. So, and what I found also fascinating, everybody's saying it's new. And then I'm saying, guys, no. In 2000, we were also doing already project where we did not know the goal, also the end state of the software, because in 2000 we had this internet hype and everybody was working for startups, and I was working for a startup to develop internet platform for reinsurance. So we did not know which product to take and how the product would look like on the internet at the start. And we had waves, which we defined the scope, and we were going then from there along. So today it's sprints. At that time we called it waves. Today it's burn down. We had burn up graphs. So I don't think this is really new. We did it already in the past, and we just not give it the word like agile. We just found a way to organize ourselves when we did not know what is the end state of the application. And we were just going along with waves and slices. And today this is just called agile. And therefore I'm saying, for me, this is not new. We have done this already in the past.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that the key learning or takeaway here is that the project approach has to fit the project goal and ambition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's been, that is, many get that wrong today. So because they think agile is kind of now the means to kind of get all our problems solved in project delivery and project management. And that's not the case. So often when I come to a project I'm being called, I first from a higher level verify what is the ambition and the goal of the project, exactly like you said, Sriram. Also, do we have the flexibility at all in scope, time, or budget, or whatever? Budget usually not, unfortunately. But very, very often people get the approach wrong because it's not aligned to the project goals and ambition. And I think that's one of the major root causes for project failures, because it puts all the wrong expectations in the head of the people. What can be done, should be done, and has to be done. So I think that's always something to consider when looking at the project.
Yes, exactly. And the funny thing is also, if people are doing agile, they believe they don't need a plan and they don't need tracking. Then I'm also telling them agile in its definition is more planning, more tracking, and more administrative effort if you do it in a waterfall way where you just have clear milestones which you have to follow. But agile means you can change every day. So you need a better planning and a better tracking than any other project. And I think that's big misunderstanding which people are usually having there.
Yeah.
Usually
maybe
also, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, maybe the scope isn't fixed or clear cut always, but as such, in every other aspect, actually, it's very rigorous. It's a very rigorous approach, and yeah, people also misunderstand that. As you said, people think now we can just do what we want. It's agile. Put some labels on top of it, like sprints and velocity and whatever, and then everybody believes we'll be in a good shape.
Kerstin, what I want to show you, this is actually, we won't take too long, let's take a couple of minutes. If I can share my screen.
Then wait, I need to stop sharing my one. I guess now you can share.
Okay, this is actually an assessment I've performed for my current client, and it's nothing confidential here, so it can be shared. I just whistle through it. You won't have to read everything. In this client, this actually touches on many of the points, Kerstin, that you and Raphael have made. I mean, Raphael made the point that the project management is actually leading. Yeah, it's not just writing a plan and managing the administration. In this client, they really didn't understand, and many of them still do not understand what is the difference between a project manager, a scrum master, and a PMO. They just continuously get confused in terms of what one is versus another. And it's taken a while to educate them in terms of saying a project manager, the way I see one is someone who uses the tools, the 7 stages, what you showed in your framework, Kerstin, as a means to deliver. There are tools that you use to achieve an outcome. That's what a project manager does. He's not an administrator. And the Scrum Master doesn't have the ability of all the skills required a project manager does. And so the PMO is a support for the project manager as opposed to a replacement for the project manager. You think it'd be obvious to many people, but in this client, it's been an education. The other thing I wanted to share with you is this is an ongoing debate, especially at this client, in terms of how do you set up a project? And the traditional way the project's been set up in the past is the way on the left. I mean, I also came from Accenture and Deloitte, Kerstin. And so when you go into an account, you have a program director, a project manager, you have functional leads, technical leads. The buck stops with the project manager in terms of you have accountability for the deliverables, for the client relationship, for the budget, and also to delivering a profitable outcome for your consulting company. This was the traditional model. The current model, which is there at my client, is the project manager is like a peer along with the product owner and the technical person. And it's a matrix where the product owner has control over budget of the product resources or the functional resources. The technical product manager has the control over technology resources. In many cases, they take their own decisions. For example, now they decided that in one of my projects, the Swiss resources are too expensive, so we need to get rid of them. And I'm thinking, a project manager is coming and screaming at me, no, I can't. That's purely taken from a cost perspective. It's not something that the project can survive with. So the accountability and the deliverable responsibility is split, and the project manager doesn't have full control in the current model. And many of them, and Agile proposes this in some way or the other, is to say that you can get rid of the project manager completely. This is the model on the right, where they say that the product owner can do everything. But in my experience, this particular client, for example, the product owner doesn't have the skills to do this, what's required of a project manager. And the project manager, if you want to try and make that person a product owner, doesn't have the business knowledge, etc., to become this. So this is what the Agile advocates in terms of a proposed model, i.e. there's no BAs, there's no project managers, it's all done product-led, and it's just using Scrum Masters and get things done. I feel in all my clients that I've been in, and I've been in quite a few, they are not at this stage of advancement.
Yeah. So, I think one of the mistakes there is also believing project management is not a specific skill set.
Yeah, that's right. And in the interest of time, I won't go through all of it. Another thing that I will show you here, this is an actual assessment, Kerstin, that I performed for a client that both you and I know we work for. And this is the point we touched, and you, myself, and Raphael all touched on, is this scope, cost, time. And what Agile means and what Agile doesn't. And in my experience in digital, there are 2 types of projects. One where the MVP is more or less fixed. Yep. And it requires, there's no flexibility on scope. In fact, it's a scope plus. And so this traditional approach for Agile delivery in terms of we'll do something in 3 months, then another month, doesn't work. You have to get the first release out. That would involve, in many cases, putting in huge amounts of infrastructure, networks, etc. And that takes time. It can take 12 months, it can take 18 months. After which, once the MVP is done,
Yes.
then you can iterate. Okay, say it's 3 months, 2 months, whatever your maturity is. And it's been an education in terms of educating this client, because I run a portfolio of projects on my program. I have 11 project managers reporting to me from different places, and each one of them fits in a different scale on the spectrum. Some of them have had MVPs, they can go agile every 2 months, every 3 months. When there's the first MVP that's huge, a different approach is required. And this is not often understood or well appreciated by many of the people. It's an education process. So I just wanted to share that, Kerstin, and I will stop sharing now. But these are things from an actual assessment that I've done recently. My current client.
I can just confirm. I would fully agree on that one. But as we are now, I guess we can talk and discuss these kind of topics for another hour. But we just have 50 minutes left. Therefore, I would ask Vlad, are there any questions we should answer? As I was not really following any chatting, or if people have any hand raising.
So there was one question from Miro, which was broadly answered earlier, around, that there are always dependencies, and the fact that a lot of them are actually unknown. His point was, is this not really a broad question in terms of how do you do dependency management?
Okay. Should I give him, I will give him speaker allowance. Maybe he has another question, because usually Miro has
questions.
Yes.
Hello all together. Good morning, and thank you for the introduction in regards of that. Yes, my wife told me as well that I have a lot of questions. And yeah, when it comes to this, I mean, dependencies, in IT projects, dependencies, there are technical dependencies, there are dependencies on stakeholder management, there are dependencies on the organization and things like this. So, I mean, when you ask such a question, my broad answer would be yes, somehow we manage dependencies. So I wonder, isn't it too broad? That was basically my idea. Wouldn't you basically subdivide and say, do you have all your technical dependencies under control? Do you have all your other things,
Yeah, Miro, to maybe chip in on that one, the biggest mistake being made is, if you go to a project and ask the individual streams or teams, what dependencies do you have? They start moaning about, okay, to deliver this feature, I need this IT component. That's not a bloody dependency. It's just part of all the program and project work that needs doing. So very often dependencies or perceived dependencies are mixed up with actual just having a proper plan and to make sure that things fit together. I think for me, the most important dependencies, or for me, a dependency is something that I might not be able to handle or control in the project or leading a program myself, or you can look at whatever level you want to look in a project, things that really kind of are out of your own control, and that might be then real and valid dependencies. So usually asking for dependencies, you end up with a long list, most of which are not real dependencies that need kind of proper addressing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Therefore, I would also give the advice, I would manage external dependencies. But the internal dependencies, as Raphael said, are usually a mix of where you have just a certain sequence which you need to follow, and somebody needs to deliver, and you need. But if you want to manage this kind of internal dependencies, you have huge tracking. But important is to manage the external dependencies. So what are factors which you don't have any influence on, but which are affecting you? Usually in huge organizations, these are other projects. So you need to go through the whole project portfolio and understand what is the goal of the project and how would it affect you. I think that's a very, very necessary exercise to ensure success. Also sometimes forgotten, and you find out later, shortly before cut-off, there was a project which was changing something. Oh, we need to incorporate that. and then you have already a blocking point for your cutover. I think this external dependency, I think, is key, and you should not forget it. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say there's 3 types of dependencies that in my current program. There are projects, there are dependencies on other departments for a particular project. For example, if you need to provision infrastructure, it's a different department within the client that needs to do it. So that you need to track. There are dependencies, for example, software vendors. We spoke about this earlier, Kerstin, about what they need to do in terms of supplying and doing that. So that's there. You have dependencies on other projects within the program, and you have dependencies on other programs outside yours. So I'm having to track all of these. The first one you would expect the project manager to do, but the second one also this project manager to say the dependence on others. Some of them are also managed at the program level to ensure that the project managers are kept informed. So internal project dependencies on other projects within the program, and dependencies on external programs itself. All of them need to be thought through carefully. And if there is a problem where you don't know what the dependency is, that really is quite worrying.
Okay, thanks for the answer. Just wondering, I have another question as well, you know, if I might pose it. So when we talk about readiness, you know, the project comes to an end and we talk about readiness, and we always talk about operational readiness. Basically, the business is up to speed, can actually work with, let's say in an IT project, core banking project, can work with the core banking application. The processes are adjusted. It looks all good. I've sort of always have the feeling we sort of forget DevOps, meaning basically we in a project we throw over the software over the fence somehow, which is, I mean, not absolutely true, but then the internal engineers, the internal software developers, the guys actually who have to maintain and run it are not prepared. Maybe that's just an experience that I recently had in one of the projects where I am. But what is your point? I have the impression this is sort of not always managed properly or not seen properly in projects.
Yeah, true. But operational readiness is both business and IT. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't agree more. It needs to be thought about at the right point in time and be set up well ahead before the project goes live. So the post-life and production processes are ready, managed, operated. First, second, third level support, continuous improvement, continuous deployment, all these things. Yes, and I agree they are often forgotten because everybody's in the midst of, oh, we have to deliver, we have to go live.
Yeah, okay. I concur. Yeah.
I guess Vlad will tell you, it's part of our cutover management training and concept. It has a section readiness and acceptance where we are going through all kinds of readiness criteria. We can send you our template.
Okay.
Would have a framework as well, Kerstin.
I will send you the framework. Yeah, I have a framework for that as well, of course. As we develop this cutover training, we have 15 sessions. One is readiness assessment.
And then a final one for me. Sorry to have 3 ones, but a final one for me is, you know, we all do IT projects, and I most of the time do IT projects, in fact, and IT projects tend to fail. And last time I've heard a project manager saying, "Damn IT projects! Everything else works so nicely, but these idiotic IT projects tend to fail." And I sort of, it stuck in my head, and I was wondering, is one of the reasons that we see in IT projects failing also the reason that we have very often a big bang approach? You know, it's like everything goes at a certain cut-over date, everything goes live. We don't really have a shuffled approach in the sense of saying, first we take this little bit live, then we take this little bit live. And it also sort of goes hand in hand with the thing that Kerstin doesn't like agile, because agile for me, I think very well works when we have sort of not a big bang, but we have really artifacts which we can take early in the process live. What are your opinions on that?
If I would start, I think IT projects, the problem is that you need to be really done because the software and the infrastructure and everything is not ready for compromises. You know, I have done this transformation project at the bank in Basel, which was not an IT project, But it's then always a question, are the tasks done or not? And if you have to adjust processes, it's easier to say, okay, we are done, even if not the last piece are really connecting. But for an IT project, the IT, the software, the hardware, there is no compromise. It's either done or not. And therefore, everything has to be finished.
Yeah, you're right. It has to be done. It has to work. That's Kerstin. That's very true. And I'd also say the point made, I think, both earlier in this discussion is it is complex. Good project management of especially IT projects that have a lot of dependency is very complex, and it's an art as much as it's a science in terms of managing stakeholders. How do you do it? And it's not given for example, you pay in this country, in the UK, you pay lawyers a lot of money. Say they're experts, saying they'll get something done, they know the law, etc. Whereas project management is saying, oh yeah, just put a project management. It's not given the level of rigor and picking. Example, many times some of my clients have asked me, oh, we should be right if we choose Accenture or IBM, right? It should get done. No, not necessarily. You can get good teams from Accenture, you can get bad ones. It depends on who you get. Similarly, from a small provider, you can get a team of bad. It really, it requires deep thinking in terms of saying, the people you pick, are they really good? They can come, the good people can come from small organizations, big organizations, medium-sized organizations. And the big banks, the current one, especially Kerstin that I'm in, which you know, they have rules saying you can't work with this vendor, that vendor, etc. It's pretty restrictive in terms of what it is. Whereas good people come from everywhere. That's also an issue.
Okay.
Yes. And the problem is the bosses, and that was one of my points, like very often the leadership might also be the issue and not the solution, because they believe they are the best project managers and they have done this several times. Very often they have never done it before, but they know everything. And to acknowledge that you have not done it before and that you are needing help to do all this assessment on senior management level, very often also not the case. And then the problem is starting at the top.
Okay.
That's one of my experiences so far, especially, and I remember the project where Vlad was on at our famous client. And the first 2 years, Avalok was coming up to me and saying, Kerstin, this project is going wrong. What can we do? And my answer was, I know, but the problem is it's on the top. How can you tell the boss that he is the problem? Very, very difficult. And the only thing why this project at the end was going live, because the boss of the boss was realizing he has a problem and was sending over somebody to manage the boss. This was the only way how it was working. And very often, I think this is at least what I have seen, the bosses are the problem. And to fix this one, nearly impossible.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Vlad, do we have other questions?
Yes, so there's one question from Gilherm. Hopefully I said the name right. So he's asking, could you share one experience where you took a project in a very bad situation and change it completely to a successful one? What were the 2-3 main causes for its turnaround?
Okay, shall I try and answer that, Kerstin?
Yes.
Okay, this is again just an experience on my current program also, where the issues were, let me pick 2 or 3 big reasons why the project was failing, or the program itself was failing. One was extremely unrealistic expectations set by the senior stakeholder, because he's promised something to the business that he promised a date which is based on nothing. And that was being pushed down on the program director and people below him or her. And the program director was behaving, rather than questioning the senior stakeholder and the client. Like you said, Kerstin, it's hard, it's not easy. But instead of doing it when it's faced with an impossible situation, you have to just put your hand up and say this is the case. Rather than do that, what he was doing is getting overstressed. The scope was something that just couldn't be achieved within the timeline. And he just didn't have the ability to go up to the client and say, sorry, for these reasons, which I've thought through, this is why it can't be done. And he tried to just keep doing what the client did. And this led to obviously failure. And we were protected to some extent because Kerstin, your program, I think it was supposed to go live in September, got pushed to December and then February. So we got away with it to saying, okay, right, some other program also has moved. So that's why we got away, because we were not ready. Just telling you the truth, we were not ready in September. There's no way we would have gone live. But they just said, okay, some other program announces that it's a dependency, so we're not live. And there was also a second element, which was a toxic culture, from which is to say, this is the ability, this is the project which has not gone live, and then just push down, and everybody's saying, don't do sit, push code straight to sit and UAT. Let's just take shortcuts. Let's just go dev straight to UAT, just to production, etc. And so when I got into the situation, when I came as a program director in September 2018, he said, my predecessor who was leaving, he just said, we're going live today. And then as the weeks passed, I dig under the surface. I said, we are nowhere near going live. It's just a myth that we're anywhere near go live. So how did I fix it? So that was the issue. So I had to explain to the client, look, I'm new. So I had this honeymoon period when I had to go tell him, so this is not working. And this is the period where you have to, these are the things you need to do, you need to fix. And also systematically went through the team of managers, the project managers that he had, and picked out the ones that fitted the culture of the way I wanted to work, which was being transparent, straightforward, and said, if things work, they work, they don't work, and not just say yes. And this actually also involved taking out a number of project managers that didn't work and putting other ones in. And so through a slow process of doing that, I now have 11 PMs, and most of them, I'd say, this is perhaps the only client where I actually managed to turn and have all 11 of them good. Usually about 2 or 3 don't work out, or 1 or 2 don't work out. This was key part of the delivery. And it's taken 2 years to turn around, but most of the projects have turned around successfully.
Yeah, I would start from there. I think turnarounding a project cannot be done from one day to another. That's the first thing. If people are coming to you and say, my project is in deep shit, help me, it needs to be fixed in 1 month, I don't believe this. It takes some time, and you need also to start with the right steps. You cannot fix everything immediately. So on my current project, there's also lots of things which need to be fixed, and people are telling me, you need to fix this and this. And I said, guys, this is not the first priority. The first priority for me is understanding where are we on climbing the mountain. Are we 50% through? Are we 80% through? Are we at 20%? So first trying to find out where are we, and then trying to find out how much do we still have to do. So how big is the mountain to climb in total? And then you need to put it over the timeline and making a plan. And then you can fix all the other things, the organization and everything which is coming along with the project, the processes, the reporting, the contract management. But before, for example, if you know the contract is one of the big problems, you cannot start there because you need to put a proposal on it. So you know where are you, what is the plan going forward. So I believe there is a certain order which you need to follow, which means you need to understand where you are, how big the mountain is, and then you need to do a plan. And then you can fix all the other points which are on the road blocking. And this will take time. Just to make the assessment might take already 4 weeks, and then doing a plan might be another 1 to 2 months, and to change organization takes also time. So that's my experience, and this is how I usually start: understanding where we are, understanding the mountain, and making a plan. So Raphael, I'm pretty sure you have also there some stories to tell.
I could go on and on, not sure how much time we actually have left. So,
I have to, I'll shortly join a call with the client, but I guess 2 minutes you have.
No, I mean, the concrete question, I mean, usually for me, it's a bit a conundrum being the consultant and then being asked to do the assessment and then to take over the project. But last year I was asked to do a review for a core banking replacement for a smaller private bank, but that was really in deep shit. And I mean, it was essentially more or less everything in the mix that we discussed over the last hour. So bad vendor management, not properly understanding the scope, not only managers, no leaders, We made sure that the focus was set right, really understanding where we are on the mountain, making sure to understand how high the mountain it actually is, getting out of the fog, so understand to see the cross on the mountain, understand what it takes to get there, and did some tweakings from the staffing end. And get everyone really focused on the important stuff, because yeah, people got lost in the complexity, lost focus. So again, simplicity is key, understanding where we are, where we want to go. In the end, it's people business. And Miro, there's no such thing as IT projects. It's always value creating projects that have an IT component. And in the end, it's all about people. That's my experience, and making sure they're motivated to do the right things and get the right focus.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think time is over. It's now already 2 minutes past 10, and I know that I'm expected in another call. So I can just thank Raphael and Shiram for their participation.
Thanks for the opportunity, Kerstin.
It was very nice. I hope all our participants could also take something away. So I have there also a small question for everybody. Now my presentation is stuck. Now I'm too fast. So some little homework for all participants. Think about your own project, assess it, maybe share the results. You see our email address on the bottom. And if there are further questions, feel free also to send it to the address or to me personally if you have my email address. And then I can just give you an outlook. We are doing the next coffee talk on Friday the 23rd. It's this time about software testing, usually coming from the old school quality assurance of my project. Nowadays, it's a little bit seen in a different way. So I'm expecting there are also lively discussions. I invited already somebody coming from a testing expert company who are doing professional testing for products, but also for projects. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, and therefore I can just now close. Thank you everybody for participating. Vlad, thank you for joining from Singapore, even if it's now getting a little bit later at your place. So have a nice evening, and everybody have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.